More quick remote check this time. 70 can, almost a second. Contact with a test. 1, 2, go.
VLS is go for core stage engine start.
Liftoff confirmed.
Copy liftoff.
Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. My name is Patricia Moore and I work for NASA's Communication and Public Engagement team. We're super excited that you're here with us today as we plan to launch Artemis 1 tomorrow. You guys excited? Yeah! Who's sticking around to watch it in person? Yeah. Like everybody, right? If for some reason you don't, if you can't stick around, it will be streamed on YouTube, social media, will be all over the news. So, but this afternoon we have a really great presentation for you. Our guest speaker is Kim Fleming, and she works for Lockheed Martin Space as the Artemis 3 mission manager. So Kim, why don't you tell us about Artemis?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Who's excited after that video? Yeah! Right? All right, we are going. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the Artemis program. It is really all about our next generation of exploration. We are going to the moon. Artemis 1 is really just a stepping stone to the future of us landing on the moon and developing an Artemis base there. So excited about that.
All right, Artemis is much more than NASA, right?
It is much more than NASA. The Artemis program is NASA, but also working with all of our commercial and some international partners actually, all building up the Artemis program to include not only all that we talked about for Artemis 1, but some of the future items we're going to talk about as well for the Gateway.
Yeah, so no matter where you are in the United States, your state has touched Artemis in one way or another. All right, so Artemis 1's our test flight tomorrow. Walk us through our objectives.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Artemis 1. So Artemis 1 is really the 4th test flight that we've had from an Orion perspective. So I work on the Orion program, as Patricia mentioned, and this is really our 4th test flight program to finalize and check out a lot of the subsystems of the spacecraft. It is the first test flight for the SLS rocket, so we're excited about that, to have a ride to send us to the moon. Some of the key elements for us in this mission is not only the heat shield. As some of you may know, if you saw in the Gateway Center, we have VFT-1. That was a key test flight for the heat shield, but this is a even bigger test because we'll be going to lunar orbit and we'll have additional lunar entry conditions to test the heat shield. So, yeah.
So a few other objectives specifically, and we can talk about these later if you want. We've got satellites flying on the Orion, the back end of the Orion, and the back of the service module. So we'll have science experiments in addition of testing out the spacecraft.
And there's also some radiation experiments that are inside the Orion spacecraft that will help as we put astronauts on there for Artemis 2.
All right, so this will walk us through the trajectory of our first mission.
Artemis 1 will restore America's ability to reach the moon with systems built for humans. Launching east from Kennedy Space Center, the Space Launch System will propel an uncrewed Orion spacecraft to orbit and then commit to a lunar trajectory with a trans-lunar injection. Its outbound coast will intersect with the moon to enter a distant retrograde orbit. With systems checked, the engine will once again fire to exit lunar orbit and set Orion on a path back to Earth.
Exciting, we can't wait for that splashdown on Orion, I'm telling you. The launch is going to be great, but splashdown is going to be fantastic.
All right, so Kim, why don't you walk us through your role within the Orion program?
Yeah, so let's see. I have been on Orion for a long time, but really this is sort of a culmination of a dream of mine. Since I was 10 years old, I came here to Kennedy Space Center at 10 and said, wow, I want to be an astronaut. You know, this is it for me. Life events happened. I trained to be a pilot, but had some knee issues. But you know, I opted and got there another way. Became an engineer, and now I've been working on the Orion program for 15 years. It's been fantastic. So, and culminating now, you know, I'm the Artemis 3 mission manager. So, you know, a little bit about what that means. It means that, you know, my responsibility is to design, build, and deliver the spacecraft to meet NASA's mission objectives for Artemis 3, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But that's kind of a little bit about me.
All right. So kind of walk us through the different components of Orion.
Yeah, so there's really kind of three elements of Orion. And one thing I definitely want to point out is, you know, Orion is really the only exploration class vehicle of its kind out there. There's really kind of three parts. There's the crew module, which is where the crew habitats. They have displays and controls. That's where they live as they go into space. The launch abort system, which is on top of it there that you see, that's really to keep the crew safe. Like when it's on the rocket, if something goes wrong and we need to get the crew away from the rocket, that's what the launch abort system does. And then the last part there is the service module, which is a big piece. It's provided by our European partners. ESA provides that. The prime contractor is Airbus. And the service module really provides all the power, the propulsion, the water, the oxygen that the crew needs. So it stays with us through our whole mission. And we jettison that just prior to reentry.
All right, so here's a look at Orion without it being covered with
Exactly.
the shroud.
Yeah, these are live pictures. So the one on the left here is the launch abort system that we talked about. And on the right over there, on the top, where you see the silver, that's actually the crew module. And the lower part with the solar panels, they're actually folded up. That's the service module.
All right, so...
All right. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, I won't ask the question,
Okay,
you just
sorry.
go.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen after Artemis 1. So Artemis 2 is the first crewed mission, and we'll be sending humans basically to rendezvous, go around, orbit around the moon. It'll be the first time that we have sent crew that far. Following that is the Gateway, which is really a primarily power propulsion hab module to support crew in an orbit around the moon. And the whole goal is that we're wanting to explore and set up an Artemis base there in the long term, which is Artemis 3 through 5, where we start that endeavor.
All right. So what will it be like in Orion as the crew goes towards the moon? Yeah, so you know, when the crew, there's 4 crew in the Orion crew module, and you can kind of see here, there's some pictures of displays. It is an all-glass cockpit, and we, today even, you know, we're preparing for Artemis 2, and we, on the Lockheed Martin side, work with NASA in conjunction to do a lot of testing of crew displays, and a lot of that is in preparation, because the crew has to train, you know, for 2 years prior to an event like Artemis 2. So we do a lot of that testing activity, and yeah, you know, there's a lot of redundant controllers in there, so a little bit of tight quarters is what it looks like in there, but we have a little bit of a photo bomber right here. Yeah, so. Yeah, and this picture was taken at Johnson Space Center. We have a mock-up facility where the astronauts, what they call doing human-in-the-loop testing, so can the people, you know, move and flip switches and touch things with their gloves on, you know, just making sure everything is ergonomic and fits properly. All right, so walk us through Artemis 3.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned a little bit about Artemis 3, and maybe you can go to the next slide because it might help. Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about what are we going to do on Artemis 3. So similar to Artemis 2, we're going to launch on SLS, and the difference here is we'll have 4 crew on board, heading towards the moon, and as we enter the orbit around the moon, the human lander system will be there, being built by SpaceX, and we will dock with the HLS system. Once we dock with that, 2 crew members will go over to the human lander system, 2 crew members will stay on board Orion. Those 2 crew members on HLS will descend and land near the south pole of the moon. They will stay down there for about 6.5 days, doing EVA activities, collecting samples, that type of thing. And then after that, we'll ascend and come back to Orion, dock, and then the 4 crew members will come back to Earth, just the same as we're doing on Artemis 1.
Yeah, so Orion's kind of like the taxi service between
It
Earth
is,
orbit
yes.
and Moon orbit.
Exactly.
All right, so we don't know where we're going to land yet, but we have an idea of some potential landing sites.
Right, yeah. I think about a week ago, if you all saw in the news, there was an announcement of these 13 regions or potential sites for Artemis 3 landing. These sites were specifically chosen near the south pole of the moon, specifically because potential for water, which is important as we want to continue to build up a moon base there. And one thing I didn't mention, I should have, is the Artemis program, we're using the moon as a base, but really as a platform and a jumping point to Mars. And a big part of that is, the science behind using water to help us build fuel and learn as much as we can about being out there on Mars.
Yep. All right, so we're going.
We are going. So excited about it tomorrow. Yeah, we are, very close. They're going to be tanking tonight, so it's going to be exciting. And watch the social media because that's where they'll be announcing everything.
And
so.
we've got parts of your spacecraft already built and here at Kennedy, right?
That's right, yeah. We were talking about that earlier. Artemis 3 is actually underway being built, the crew module, so it starts as a pressure vessel is what we call it, and at the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout building that's just on the other side of the gate there is well underway. And the crew module adapter, which actually attaches to the service module, is pretty far along. So we are definitely working towards, a launch in 2025. So
yeah, we've got the rocket parts and the spacecraft parts already in production all the way up to Artemis 4. All right, so exploration's a team sport.
that's right. It takes all of us and international partners as well as, United States, so it's great. Yeah, and NASA, there's so many suppliers out there.
And what I find interesting is you can work at NASA and be a teacher, a communicator, an artist, a lawyer, a business person. We have security, we have admin, astronaut trainers, robotics, machinists.
Machinists, yeah. Welders. We need welders.
Almost every discipline and skill you can imagine, there's a place for it in the space industry. Not just at NASA, but there are dozens, probably hundreds of different aerospace companies that all contribute to our missions. All right, so follow along with us. You can follow us on social media. For teachers and parents, we have great, amazing STEM resources that are all free to you. And you can join us for the broadcast. You can listen in on your phone if you're outside waiting for it to launch. We start at 3:33 a.m. tomorrow with our broadcast.
Who's going to be there at 3:30? Come on, raise your hand.
I said it wrong. It's 6:33. I'm so sorry.
6:33.
I was like 3:33.
I was like, wow, that's early. I'll be up at 3:30.
I said it wrong. It was 6:33. 2 hours before the window opens, and there's a 2-hour window from 8:33 to 10:30.
Okay, that might be better. 6:30?
We'll all be awake, though.
Okay, yeah.
We'll all be awake.
That's right.
All right. So now we'd love to open it up for questions. Thank you, Kim, so much.
Of course.
How can we find out on our phones when, link up to your, the timetable and what's going on?
How can you link up to the timetable for the launch?
Is there
Yeah,
a
so
site?
I'll tell you what I know. You probably know way more. But so if you look on the NASA webpage, I know they have NASA TV. That's probably the best way to watch. Of course, I'd say if there's a lot of people around, cell phone service tomorrow is probably going to be a little challenging, but yeah.
There's also an app, and I wish I had the info up here, but it's called, the abbreviation or acronym is ARROW, and it's an app, and there's going to be data that's coming from the Orion spacecraft once it's on to the moon, and its trajectory, like where it is, its orientation. So that will also be on the NASA website, or you can look on social media, on the Orion social media page. They'll have a link so you can download that app, and that's free. And there's a Callisto
I was just going to mention Callisto, actually. So Callisto, if you, I think the Gateway Center has something in there. I haven't been in there yet, but so Callisto is a 100% Lockheed Martin industry kind of developed and paid for capability that's on the Orion spacecraft. It was a joint effort with Lockheed Martin and Amazon, actually. So if you want, you can actually say to your Alexa device, Alexa, take me to the moon. And it will actually tell you how Orion is doing throughout the mission. So.
In the back, right there.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, good, how are you?
Good. What are the short-term and long-term goals of the Artemis mission?
Short-term and long-term goals of the Artemis mission.
Yeah, so short-term goals, especially when we talk about Artemis 1, it's really a test flight, right? So we're testing out the rocket, we're testing out final installations of subsystems on the spacecraft for Orion. And really, that's all a building block to putting people on board for Artemis 2. The long-term goals is, we want to establish a base on the moon as a jumping off point to get to Mars. That's, it's all about exploration.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fleming, for coming over here and this explanation. Looking at the toy that you are in charge of, the Artemis 3,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, on the square footage, how big is the crew module?
Square footage.
Right, so I know we sending 4 humans on the Artemis 3 mission.
Yeah, I'm not sure the overall dimensions of it, but I mean, it is very tight quarters in there. I mean, you can imagine it will fit basically on this stage. So it is very, I don't have the numbers on the
I was
bottom.
hoping it was in this note section, but it's not. I can tell you it's 30% larger
Than the Apollo.
But you have to Google it.
Do they have a toilet in there? I mean,
Yeah, toilet. Can you talk about?
Oh yeah, they have a toilet.
Commodities inside.
I was waiting for the toilet question. Yes, there is a toilet, actually. So the toilet is actually based on the design from the space station, but there is a toilet with actually a enclosure so that the crew can use the toilet with privacy. But yeah, there is a toilet in there. So yeah, of course.
In these 50 years, what you define as the most important advantage and improvements Artemis has compared with Apollo, besides the cost? Apollo cost $2 trillion, so, but the whole program, what's the technological advance that are in Artemis compared to the predecessor Apollo?
Yeah, technological advances compared to Apollo, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I'll speak to what I know, which is my background is in the avionics side, so, there is significant difference in the redundant systems, which is really all about crew safety and making sure that as we go to these further environments, that the crew is safe and, all the systems it takes to keep those redundant actuations alive and everything. So it's really about that, right? It's those advances. You think about the computers that we have now compared to what they had in Apollo, significant improvement in technologies there.
Right here.
How often will there be astronauts on the Lunar Gateway?
Ooh.
How often will there be astronauts on Lunar Gateway?
I'm not sure.
I'll give it my best guess. I don't think all of that has been completely worked out, like all the details, but what I can tell you is that if we hope to have a gateway finished and Orion docked to it by Artemis 4, right?
Correct, yep. Artemis 4.
And then if there are 4 crew members, which we plan to have on that mission go, then is it 5 though? I think 4 is uncrewed.
4 is crewed, as I understand it, and I think we'll be using Orion at this point to use some of the engine capability to dock other payloads with Gateway, I believe. Yeah.
So they wouldn't be in Gateway for a long period of time. Think of Gateway as like an outpost, a way station. So get out of Orion, get in Gateway, get prepared to go to the surface of the moon, do whatever they need to do for that next piece of their mission, get in the landing system, go down, be there a week, however long the mission is. I'm not sure. You probably know how long.
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to say is, I think of the Gateway as enabling so that we can have longer missions on the moon, right? So as I mentioned for Artemis 3, we won't have a gateway. So we're docking direct with the human lander system and going to the surface of the moon. So we really just have a limited amount of time because we have a limited set of oxygen and water and those resources. So I think of the Gateway as exactly that. It's really an outpost to allow us to have those extended moon surface missions.
But the goal is to make it bigger. And I'll pull up a picture. So it will start off pretty small initially, and then with our international partners, it's in the other PowerPoint, here we go. Do you want to talk a little bit about like partnering and that sort of thing? It will expand a bit.
Yeah, so what I would say is, so we'll have the Gateway, which is, again, a lot of, it's NASA, but it's a lot of industry partners and global partners, right? The European Space Agency is contributing to this. But it will be, so I would think of it as a very small version of ISS. It's not that big. It really is just an outpost.
I'll do all the way in the back, right there. Terraforming the moon or Mars.
I don't know, as we talked about, some of those missions for future missions have not been totally vetted at this point, is my understanding.
I think it would be super cool, but I haven't heard anybody at NASA or anyone figure out a way we could do that in a quick amount of time. Theoretically, it could be done like over hundreds or thousands of years, right? Yeah. Like that's what sci-fi says. Yeah. All right, we'll do somebody on this side. Yes.
Artemis 3, are they going to be repositioning supplies for the current?
Repositioning supplies on Artemis 3, or bringing everything with you?
Oh, bringing everything with us, yeah. There will be no additional support services. I think on the human lander system there may be some additional supplies, but it would all be self-contained.
Right here.
All right. I guess I have two questions. First of all, what's the reasoning behind the South Pole landing site for Artemis? And how are you going to get Gateway to the moon?
The first part is why the South Pole, and then how do we put Gateway in orbit around the moon?
Yeah, so the South Pole is really kind of two parts. As I mentioned, there's, they had a lunar orbiter that, did a lot of science missions there, and they believe that, there is water there. And so, that's kind of key to these future missions, is to have that. But the other part of it is, as I mentioned, it's all about exploration. We've never been to the South Pole of the moon before. So we will be going further than we've ever gone before.
And to answer your second part about Gateway, the first few components are actually going to be launched by SpaceX and positioned in orbit around the moon. I can't tell you what the plan is for the other pieces, but for sure the first few pieces will be launched by SpaceX. All right, we're going, this gentleman right there.
You mentioned before EVA. I was just curious what that stood for.
I'm sorry, yeah. Us engineers, we use acronyms. Extravehicular activities. So on the moon, they'll be doing a lot of different activities. On Artemis 3, there's no plan for a car, like you probably remember Apollo had a car. There's no plan for that at this point, but it really is just exploration on foot, outside of the vehicle on the moon.
You can repeat it. Go ahead. Okay. Are you going to broadcast the landing, the launch, and the landing?
Yep. I'm absolutely certain that you can follow the whole way on NASA's social media, Lockheed Martin, all of them. I bet you can follow along. Yeah.
So there'll be live broadcast by NASA at integral parts through the mission. So the entire mission, if we launch this week, is like 42 days.
Yep, 42 days.
And so we won't have commentators on, talking the whole 42 days, but there are pivotal moments throughout the mission. Once Orion is on and hits that translunar injection and is on the way to the moon, there'll be different points. And there's a schedule online that you could look at when we plan to have live commentary about what's going on.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up there. So it takes about 6 days to get to the moon, so I imagine there'll be some critical events where you'll see some live coverage. Then we'll be around the moon for several days, probably not live coverage all the time through that. But I imagine that entry and splashdown is very active, so NASA will be as we all will be following that. Yes.
Regarding the 13 possible landing sites for Artemis 3, what is the approximate distance between Atlas and Ridge and I can't pronounce the one on that side?
Yeah, I know what you're asking. Yeah, I'm not sure the distance. I know they're all within like, I think it said like 6 degrees of latitude, but I'm not sure the distance in between. Yeah, apologies.
Is the craft going to have pressurization inside? Is it going to have an atmosphere since it is a test flight?
Yeah, so he's asking if the crew module, I think, is going to have atmospheric pressure inside for Artemis 1 you're talking about? Yeah, okay. Yes, it will be pressurized.
And what's the temperature like inside?
It's
like 70 something.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Exactly. Yeah. Good, nice environment. Right here.
So I know it was a big thing, like to actually be able to recover like the boosters. Are they able? You said the service module is going to get ejected before it enters the atmosphere. Like, are you able to recover that?
Right. So the question was about the service module, whether or not it was recoverable. The service module is not recoverable now.
So it's a one-time use.
One-time use. Yes. Yep. The crew module is recovered in the Pacific Ocean, but yeah. Yep. I'll say one quick thing about that. So the launch abort system though is also non-recoverable, but we are looking at options to recover that. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned Amazon, you mentioned SpaceX. How is this funded? How is this, I mean, I'm sure there's multiple funders.
Yeah, so so again, I work on Orion, so we are prime contractor to NASA at Johnson Space Center, so our contract is with NASA. But I think, everybody has a different funding capability, so.
But if it's a NASA funded, if NASA funds, it comes from the taxpayer dollars.
Correct, yeah.
NASA's a government agency. But what's interesting about some of the contracts and the way that NASA's doing business differently is some of the contracts we're asking some of the developmental and the research piece be covered by the industry. So each contract is a little different, and so we're invested as NASA, but these companies are also invested because space is so much more than what NASA does, right? There's a whole other commercial component to it. So it really is changing.
Yeah, and just another quick thought on that is, so as I mentioned, the Callisto payload, which is the Alexa one, so that is funded by Amazon and Lockheed Martin. NASA's not in the loop on that one. The other part I would say is, as I mentioned, the service module is provided by the European Space Agency, so they provide that to NASA. It's not funded by NASA.
Yes, ma'am. You can repeat. Okay. So the question is, why is Artemis named after a Greek god? Why is Apollo named after a Greek god? It's connected. Space exploration and Greek mythology is connected. It doesn't have to be named. It's sometimes our administrator in this case, Jim Bridenstine, a few years ago, he came up with a name because he was sitting and thinking about, what is this? What does this mean to me? What does this mean to my daughters? And then he just started, looking into stories. And Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, so it's a perfect fit. So sometimes the name of our missions are really technical names, and then sometimes they're kind of more creative. So there is no one way to name. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, that's a perfect thing.
Yes.
Have we figured out the long-term effects of zero gravity to the human body other than just exercise?
Long-term effects to the human body. Can we do anything for that besides exercise? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything besides exercising, but that's what I would.
Yeah, there's some balancing of the diet, that sort of thing, and calcium and how to absorb calcium best to keep the bone strong, but most of it is exercise. 2 hours every day on the International Space Station. Cardio and resistance is really been the key, like resistance, putting pressure on the bones, that sort of thing. Yeah. And Orion will have, for the astronauts, a small device, right?
It will have an exercise device, yeah.
Come on this side. I've been neglecting y'all. Any questions on this side? All right, we're going back on this side then.
Because Starship, the human landing system, is going to be so big, could that be used as like a temporary base?
I think the question was, the Starship landing system is going to be so big, can it be used as a landing base? I'm not aware of anything like that right now. It could be maybe a future mission, but I'm not aware of that for Artemis 3.
Yeah, they'll live in that while they're on the surface, but as far as I know, it's leaving, and then it'll be back up in orbit, right? Because it has to dock to Orion.
Right.
On the floor, right there.
This is for both the design and the operation aspect. Is artificial intelligence used in any of that process?
Okay, so, I would say yes, we use a lot of augmented reality. I'm not sure I would say this artificial intelligence, but we use a lot of augmented reality for building up the Orion spacecraft. And the intent of the Callisto payload is actually that as we go into future missions, it could be something that is used by the crew, on command. I want to send a message, I want to do this, they could use that device for that.
All right, the young lady right here on the floor.
My son wanted to know about Commander Munikin Compost and Helga
and Zohar
and what kind of sensors they had. I think we missed that.
All right, I'll pull up a picture. Give me a second. I've got like 50 billion here. Make sure I don't pass it up. Here we go.
I'll let you handle it.
Okay. All right. So we have Commander Compost here, who's named after Arturo Campos, who was instrumental in getting the astronauts home on Apollo 13. We had a naming contest a few years ago, and he won. So this astronaut, or Munikin as we call it, is wearing the exact same suit that the Orions will wear. So we talked about the Orion I think it was in the program before, but the Orion crew survival suit, right?
Yep.
And that will keep the astronauts alive if there's a situation. They can live in it for how many days? It was like, I don't know, it was like 10. It was a pretty big number if they needed to. So we're going to test out sensors, vibrations, kind of what the astronauts will experience in flight. That's what this Munikin's for. And for Helga and Zohar, this is a radiation experiment in partnership with Lockheed Martin, Germany, and Israel, so that we can test the effects of radiation on the human body, human-like tissue. And we have a vest made out of a special material that we want to see if it helps minimize the amount of radiation that's absorbed into human tissue. So this experiment's interesting because on the station we've done lots of science already on the the male anatomy. This experiment is specific for female anatomy. So female reproductive system is incredibly sensitive to radiation. So we want to know what types of material can help protect specifically the female body. So these two will be on Orion with Commander Compost, and when they come back, we'll be able to look at the dosimeters and all sorts of other sensors to see if this material works the way that we hope that it does. I'm trying to pick somebody new. I can't remember who's asked questions. Have you asked one yet? All right, go ahead.
Just timeline related. So Artemis 2, 2025, right?
Artemis 2 is 2024.
24.
Artemis 3 is 2025.
And then to the moon for the deep space with a manned crew to the moon.
Yeah, so that's Artemis 3 will take a crew to the moon and they will land on the moon. And it will be the first woman to walk on the moon. And that is in 2025, is the current proposed launch date.
Right, yes. Either one of you.
Two questions. First one, with the Artemis base camp, are there any plans of utilizing the water ice there to help fuel future missions, by like sending it up to Gateway?
So you were asking about the water ice on the moon and sending it up to the Gateway. I'm not aware of the specific plans that I know NASA's working for those future missions for Gateway, but I imagine that would be part of it, is sending it up to Gateway.
Oh, and the second question is, what kind of weather could delay the Artemis 1 launch?
Well, tomorrow, I haven't checked the weather lately, but I heard it was still 70% likely, so tomorrow morning will be much better than it has been this afternoon.
What I've heard is lightning's a big no.
Yep.
There can be rain, but there can't be lightning. And you'll hear those weather updates as, if you listen to the commentary tomorrow morning, that will be something that the commentators will get updates on from the control center, and they'll announce that weather's still looking good. If you hear the word nominal over and over again, that's a thumbs up. So not everybody knows like the NASA speak, but nominal means we're good to go. There's no issues that we know of. Right. We'll come back on this side. Oh yeah, what's your question? If you were offered to go on Artemis 3 as an astronaut, would you go?
I don't think I would go, only because I would miss my family. You know, that person could be in this crowd. It's hard to know.
Raise your hand if you would hop on the SLS on an Orion and go to the moon right now if you could. Yeah, I think a lot of us would.
If I didn't have family, I would totally be on board.
All right, let's see. And let's look for our kids. I know adults always have great questions, but when you take just a pause for a second, if there are any children that have any questions. Or there's one, you're pointing somebody over there. Go ahead, whoever that is.
How much oxygen does the mission have, and how much are you planning to use in reserve?
Yeah, so there is enough oxygen in the Orion spacecraft, which includes, by the way, the service module, which is the key part that provides the oxygen to support the crew for 21 days. So that's the way to think about it, is in terms of how long it will support the crew. There is, of course, margin on that.
All right, we've got someone right here, right there. What's your question? Say it real big and loud. Do any astronauts do what? Drive cars? In space? Oh, on this road. Oh, this road. This
Yes.
car right here.
Good question, yeah. There are no astronauts driving cars on the moon today, but one day they will be.
All right, we'll go back to the grown-ups in the very, very back.
How integrated is the Artemis system with your future plans to Mars? Is it the same launch and capsule system that's in the user road missions, or does it stop after?
So the question is, how integrated is the Artemis architecture into future exploration of Mars?
Right, that's the intent, is that we will use the same architecture, the same Orion, probably docked with something else. It's not big enough to go to Mars by itself. That'd be a small environment, but that is the intent.
All right, we've got time for maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on how long the questions are. Let's go again in the back. I think I see you right there in the back row. Yeah, turn around, look, yep, right there. How will the lunar lander be pre-staged? Ooh, so I'm not as familiar with all the details of Starship, but there's some really cool information online. I know that it's got to launch off of Earth, and it's going to be in Earth orbit for a little while, and there's some things that need to happen, and then it's going to go on to the moon. But that's about all I know.
Right, I think they're still finalizing all that, but I think it would launch from SpaceX's facility in Hawthorne.
All right, we'll come on this side. Yes.
Yeah, me again. Environmental systems. Is it like the old Apollo with the scrubbers for the oxygen, fuel cells for water, and
Right, similar technologies.
All right, we'll come back on this side. We've got maybe time for 2 more. Yes.
When will we know, when will Artemis 3's astronauts be picked?
Ooh, when will Artemis 3 astronauts be picked?
Well, hopefully soon they will announce the Artemis 2 crew, which will be the first crew. But Artemis 3, and usually most of the crew missions, they announce the crew about 2 years before the launch.
And here are some that are eligible. There will be more, but this is kind of like the first grouping. And I always like to tell everybody who my pick is for first woman. I don't get to pick, so don't think this is where NASA's going. But my pick is Jessica Watkins, who is a geologist, and she's going to fly soon on space station. So some of my friends at NASA and I, we all have a pool of who's going to be the first woman, and she's my vote. That's my pick right there. All right, one more question. All right, sir, you're it.
My son would like to know, please, how long does it take to put on a spacesuit?
How long does it take? Do we?
Yeah, I don't
I'll do
know
that
how
one.
long.
So right now, the spacesuits that we use on the International Space Station, kind of like the whole process of getting in and then up to pre-breathing, can at least be 45 minutes up to like an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. So it's a process. Putting it on doesn't take as long as doing the pre-breathing and then doing in the oxygen environment. But you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
You got to have help. But when we go to the moon, we want the spacesuits to be a lot easier to move around in. Maybe it would be nice if the astronauts didn't have to have help to put on their spacesuits. They could do it on their own.
Right.
All right, so if you have any other questions, Kim and I will be hanging out here a bit. You can come up and talk with us. I do have to get ready for our next speaker, so we have another group that's from Airjet Rocketdyne that's going to be talking about rocket engines versus car engines, if you want to stick around for the next show. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kim.